Welcome to the Best Words podcast. Today we're going to be talking about superhero movies. What makes a great superhero movie? What is, in our opinion, the greatest superhero movie?
Live action.
Live action film.
Gotta make that distinction. Anyways, so, is it a faithful recap of whatever is currently in the comics or what was recently in the comics? Is it took what the comic books had and kind of just did whatever they wanted? Is it a faithful characters itself, not necessarily the story? I'm trying to think.
Does it develop the characters better than the comic?
Not necessarily develop, but does it play true to those characters, right? Like, do they have the same qualities that you grew to love in the comic books that, did transition well to the screen?
Also, it's a little bit more difficult to do with an ongoing series because an ongoing comic series is going to continuously have new content that you're going to want to see on the big screen. Whereas if you're working on like a one-shot, then it's a lot more limited as to what they're bringing to the table, as to what content they're pulling from.
Yeah, because then they have to truncate it down.
I feel like we're gonna discount like a lot of, or discredit a lot of like older comic book movies.
That's because most of the older comic book movies weren't particularly good.
Were they though? Like, is it just a different set of standards that we hold it to now?
Yeah, it would be a different set of standards too, because they're also made in a different age.
Yeah, because a lot of the appeal of the superhero movies right now is that they're more than just a superpowered person fighting a bad guy, saving the day. A lot of them try to relate to current issues. They try to be relatable and make it more relevant to.
Well, I mean, you can only have two people.
Okay, not bad, but
you can only have two people punching the crap out of each other for so long before you have to find something new to do.
Or a new way to do it.
There's a reason that Dragon Ball Z got stale.
Did it though?
Because it took forever to do anything.
Well, it was that plus like there was never really any progression in the story. It was just like fight, harder fight, even harder fight.
This is why.
Hardest fight.
This is why Goku should have stayed dead. But that's for another time because But in terms of superhero movies, I mean, you're right. You can only punch the same person in a different way so many times.
You can kick too.
All right, that's fair.
Superman does not kick.
No, he just throws himself as fast as possible at whoever's in front of him. Just gonna fly.
I can't think of a single situation where I've ever seen Superman kick. That said, I haven't read a whole lot of Superman comics, so I'm not saying it hasn't ever happened.
So you're saying Superman movie is your favorite?
No,
that's what I'm hearing.
That's not what I'm saying at all.
I'm hearing Superman
versus
Batman versus Superman. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, so superhero movies, right? So we're not saying comic book movies. So Blade is out, Turtles is out. If we're talking old movies.
Blade is in. He's a superhero.
Is he really though? He's more of an anti-hero.
Okay,
yes.
So we're making that distinction too, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well.
Okay, so Punisher's off the table.
Right. Well, he's a vigilante, so it's not a superhero movie. It's a vigilante film. Batman's off the table too.
So
no, we're cutting out too much. No, bull.
So does Donnie Darko count? Because he's kind of a superhero.
I don't know if it counts, but I think it just doesn't count because I hate Jake Gyllenhaal.
Why?
So should we include all comic book movies?
I guess. Well, I mean,
the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right? And I'm not saying that this is my favorite comic movie. I'll say that right now. But they are superheroes. They save people. Originally, they were a comic, so
they're vigilantes.
I guess we can say
They're
comic film instead of superhero film.
They're vigilantes.
Since the original question was how would it work with a comic, or as far as adaptation. So I guess that would make more sense too, because then if we're doing superhero movies, that opens up like Mystery Men
and like
Blank Man, Donnie Darko,
Blank
a whole bunch of characters that never had
Blank Man was fun though. It was. Okay, so comic book movies. I'd say I never saw, I'm not referencing any, the original Fantastic Four movie or the Cap. I never saw those, so I can't comment. Also, heard they were kind of bad. So
they were pretty bad, which is a shame because Silver Surfer is one of my favorite comic characters of all time.
Oh, I meant the old one.
Oh,
the first one.
I don't even consider those existing.
I have not even seen that one.
So
I want to.
I'm trying to think. The first superhero, the oldest one I can think of right now is
Batman, 1960.
Let's talk about the oldest, most successful, not about Batman.
But that was when all the villains got together. It's the first time you see that happen.
But that doesn't make it good.
I didn't say good. I just said
Are you
that's
talking
what
about the
happened.
Adam West one?
Yeah,
Never seen
old.
Okay.
It's bad.
So, the oldest one I'm aware of was, the oldest good one, I think, Crow. really popular. Not the most so we're talking about
That's
that, right? It's not the most faithful. It's got a big
the
following.
argument for it becomes that you have to think that The Crow is good for you to consider it the best of the earliest good superhero
We're
movie.
never getting anywhere in the conversation. Right, we're not talking about what's a good comic. We're not talking about what's a
No.
good movie. We're talking about what makes an actual good comic book movie, right?
Look, it
So
wasn't.
you have to take your biases out.
It wasn't.
But
it
does
wasn't
it
the
have
most,
to be true
No,
to the
it
source?
doesn't. It doesn't because The Crow wasn't, right? It wasn't very true to the source material.
Right.
But it still developed a mass following, and it was a pretty good movie. I liked it. I enjoyed most of it. I think that's an instance of it doesn't have to pull directly from the comics.
I partially agree with you. I feel like it has to at least somewhat be, somewhat faithful adaptation, but it has to then send in this case into because it's movie is a different or film is a different medium. So it has to start off, I would say, pretty good as an actual film adaptation. That's how I would look at it.
Fair enough.
What about Constantine?
What about it?
Did either of y'all like Constantine?
This is a best comic book movie. Sorry.
I'm currently talking about big screen adaptation because I haven't really talked to a whole lot of people that read Hellblazer as to what they thought about it. I personally thought it was terrible.
Yeah,
Hellblazer? Constantine is Hellblazer.
Oh. I know.
For some reason, I decided to call it Constantine.
Right.
But okay, so moving forward with good ones, right? Like I mentioned earlier, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I think it's a good comic movie, right? It wasn't as dark as the original comics were. The original comics were pretty.
I liked the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. I just never consider it one of the best comic book films because it wasn't really a good adaptation of the Ninja Turtles from the comics.
That's you holding over saying that I want it to be like the comics.
Well, I expected it to be a little bit more like the comics. Not like a whole lot, but I wanted
There
it
were
to...
4 turtles, their master was a rat, they each had
Oh my
different
goodness.
headbands, they used the same weapons.
But they didn't even
They're
have
still in
different
New York.
headbands in the first
I
time.
know.
Honestly, my problems with Ninja Turtles don't come up until the second, because the second one's not as good as the first one.
How dare you?
The second one's really good, though.
But it's not
Tell me.
as good.
No. Well, I mean, for different reasons.
Though, that said, I can watch the opening scene from the Turtles 2 on repeat, because the stupid bobbing thing. Yeah!
So, and this is what I was saying earlier, right? These movies, they're kind of timeless, right? Because again, they're just good guys fighting bad guys, right? There's not
Right.
any social relevance.
I mean, honestly, a lot of it's the same as what makes a good movie. If a film is good, it'll be good regardless of when you see it.
But that's the thing, right? So I really like Winter Soldier. Winter Soldier is up there.
Winter Soldier is a really good superhero
But it is also relevant to current events. And still kind of is, right? Government, Big Brother.
Right. Like I talked about earlier, it harkens back to Cold War thrillers, and people really liked those back in the day. It's a lot
timeless, right? People who don't know what the Cold War are read this I don't understand.
It depends on which ones you're talking about. There are a number of the Tom Clancy films that people still go back and watch and love.
Red October.
There you go.
I was just throwing out there.
I mean, The Hunt for Red October is also a really good one. It's a Cold War thriller.
Yeah, but like I said, if you watch that movie, if you give some 16-year-old kid watch that movie now, you'd be like, I don't understand what this is. Cold War? What? Nuclear subs?
Right, but I wasn't saying that it was a Cold War thriller. I'm just saying it was harkening back to that style of film. Because, I mean, it's not a Cold War thriller. Just because it's called Winter Soldier doesn't mean anything. I was making a joke. It felt flat. Cold War, Winter Soldier.
No, they were Germans.
So then we make the transition into Spider-Man was the first.
Spider-Man was probably the most successful of the new generation.
Well, did Spider-Man come out before
superhero
X-Men?
Yes.
I forget that. That's not.
Did it?
Because Spider-Man came out in 97. I think X-Men came out in 98, 99.
97? Really?
Yeah. Maybe not 97.
99? Because I know X-Men came out.
I know that I was still in high school when
X-Men
it came out
in 99, though.
Did it? I know that X-Men came out after Spider-Man. Because I saw Spider-Man opening weekend, and it was before I had moved to Dallas.
You're both wrong.
What?
You're way off. Spider-Man, the original one, came out May 3rd, 2002. So way off.
Reminds me of The
Are
Matrix.
you sure the other one?
And X-Men came out
99.
X-Men can't have come out before it. That just can't. I refuse to accept that as a thing.
X-Men.
Podcast has turned into Google search.
So July 14th, 2000.
No way.
Boom!
2 years before. I didn't think about that, right?
Boom.
It came out. But
How are
I
those
would,
years so mixed up in
I
my
would,
head?
I would consider neither of those movies the best comic book movie.
No, but a lot of people really like that Spider-Man movie, which we'll get into at some other time. But
Yes.
Well, the other thing we should probably discuss is like, do you actually like, are we actually going to go like best comic book movie that we also like, or best comic book movie that objectively is good but we just don't like?
I would say that neither of those films qualify as
Well, right, but
right,
I'm just
right,
saying,
like
because there could be a really good movie that actually is a good comic book movie if we look at it objectively, but is actually really terrible.
right,
that's possible, right?
it's possible.
But
Anything is possible.
This goes back to this, right? So my biggest problem with X Men. So if you like X Men, if X Men is your like end all be all of comic book movies, like that is an instance where it could have been, in my opinion, better than comic books, but it chose to make it all about Wolverine. X Men
Your
1 and 3
opinion-
are Wolverine and some guys and girls. Like it's all it is, in my opinion. And
If your opinion of the best superhero movie of all time is X-Men, then you have poor taste in film anyway.
don't insult her. Sorry,
It's
three
terrible.
listeners.
All three of ourselves.
Yes. So I honestly think like I want to say anything before Iron Man came out, I wouldn't even throw in the running for best. Like, and that's kind of like broad brush stroke, and like I'm discrediting a lot of movies that came out way before Iron Man.
Yeah.
But I honestly
don't
feel
know if I
that
agree
way.
with that. I don't feel if I
Really?
agree
I
with
don't know
that.
if I agree with that.
I mean,
That's-
once we define, take time out of it, right, and then you start talking about like character and stuff. I still think the first Batman, while it may not hold up very well, actually has a lot of good points.
I like the first Batman. It's one of my favorite pieces.
Because Iron Man came
right.
out in 2008, and
There's a lot
anything
of
before
movies.
2008 being discredited is kind of
It's
a
like-
giant list.
Everything.
Sorry,
I'm just saying.
I'm sorry.
I mean, it doesn't discredit mine because mine was Watchmen.
I would definitely say, if you want to put time into it, I would say maybe 1980s forward.
I mean,
Like
a
there are
lot of
exceptions.
this,
There are exceptions to every rule, right? Like so, if I say anything before Iron Man, there are exceptions.
a lot of that stems from the fact that I think that what Marvel's been doing with the cinematic universe has been the most true to comic form,
Yeah.
and that they're basically just bringing comic books to the big screen in the
Well-
exact same format of like everyone gets their own movie, then we do a giant crossover, and then everyone gets more movies, and then we do a crossover again.
Well, you can bring a comic
Right.
book to the screen and it be awful, right?
Right.
Like
I'm just saying that like
Fantastic Four.
it's kind of an entirely different discussion, but they've changed the format for superhero movies because they're just expanding on the formula that comic books have already been setting up for years.
Not to mention DC's like, oh shit, we gotta get our shit together.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, that's just my opinion of it, right? Like, I agree with you. Batman, I would definitely consider in talks. I mean, when did Dark Knight?
That was like
Dark Knight Rises
2005.
was
something
like
that?
2007, 2008. It came out around the same time as Iron Man.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
somewhere around there.
It's a good movie, but I don't know that I'd say that it's a good comic book movie.
Wait, Dark Knight?
Dark Knight Rises or Dark Knight, yeah.
To be fair, like the best part about that.
It's
So,
objectively considered
but-
considered to be the best best Batman movie.
I feel like I need to watch the old movies again. to be
So,
fair, but-
so we'll go off of what you said, Brian. You said you think The Watchmen is the best comic.
I think that The Watchmen hits on what I look for in a comic movie best out of any of the films that we've discussed so far. I say that because it draws from the original source material, brings it onto the screen in a way that makes sense. Like, a lot of people didn't like the way that they ended it because it didn't end with a giant alien blowing up in the middle of New York. And I'm like, that didn't even make sense.
You didn't give a spoiler alert, man. Thanks.
If you haven't seen Watchmen at this point, that's not my fault.
Well, read Watchmen.
If you haven't done either of them, that's not my fault. Watchmen came out a long time ago.
So, spoiler alerts for this podcast, apparently.
But I mean, it brought all of the source material to modern film. It was really well cast. I don't think there was a single character in that I
I
thought
didn't
was
like
poorly
Osmondus.
cast. Yeah, but you don't have a good reason
I didn't
for it.
like Osmondus.
You don't have a
I
good
wish he would have
reason
been
for it.
recast anybody else, almost. I don't know who was in consideration for the cast, but after I read Watchmen and then saw the movie, I was like, I really wish they would have cast someone else. But actor aside,
I also thought, for the most part, the soundtrack was well done. It did a good job of incorporating music from the era that Watchmen was set in, as well as mixing in new.
I was like, wasn't My Chemical Romance on the soundtrack? That was.
I don't think My Chemical Romance was on the soundtrack.
I mean, I kind of agree with you.
But like it did the film in a way that made sense for film versus the comic book. I honestly thought that the ending that they had for the movie was infinitely better than the ending that they had for the comic because it made more sense to turn Dr. Manhattan into a villain than to just have some giant alien out of nowhere show up. Because the whole point of it was to unify people against a common foe, and everyone was already aware of Dr. Manhattan's existence. So it made sense to vilify him and make him exile.
I mean, yeah, that's one of those instances where they took liberties with source material,
Yeah.
and arguably made it better.
I mean, not according to Alan Moore.
Okay.
Alan Moore doesn't like anything but his own work.
Yeah,
Let me tell you.
Yeah, anything that he didn't have a hand in creating entirely. I mean, I see your points for Watchmen. I really enjoyed it. Personally, though, best comic book movie, Avengers. And it's the Avengers.
Now, my question about the Avengers is, do you think it would have stood as well if they hadn't done all the movies leading up to it?
Yeah.
Because
okay, out of the movies leading up to it, which ones were good?
all of them except Thor.
Captain America the first.
I really liked Captain America.
Really?
I thought it was really good. I thought it did a good job.
I mean, I like it infinitely better than Thor.
Right, but that's Thor.
I mean, like, as far as encapsulating the time period where his character was supposed to exist, I thought it did a really good job.
Yeah, it was the most entertaining out of it.
Also, Hugo Weaving as Red Skull was, fun, if nothing else.
Look, so before Avengers, what was it? It was Iron Man 1 and 2.
It was Iron Man 1 and 2, Captain America, Hulk, and Thor. Out of those movies, the only one that wasn't particularly memorable was Thor.
Well, no, the best movie out of all of those was Iron Man.
I think
Later discussion, Sam.
Captain America.
I think Incredible Hulk was better than
Captain
both
America
of those.
was definitely, yeah, dude.
Captain America better than Iron Man.
Yes.
I think that Hulk
So
was better
I know
than
where
both
you
of them.
stand when come May 27th or whatever. I see where you stand.
Well, yeah, because he also has Scarlet Witch on his
Yeah,
side.
whatever. We're not getting into this.
Although Iron Man does have.
They haven't really
Black
shown
Panther.
what's going on with Vision in this.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious what Vision's stance on the entire thing is going to be.
He's on the opposite side. He's on Tony's side.
Well, I'm just saying, like, they haven't really shown what he's doing during the entire film.
Well, unlike some trailers, Batman, Superman, they try not to give everything away.
Fucking Deadpool did the same thing.
Yeah.
It's true. All of the good jokes
I
for
was
Deadpool were
bored
in
through
the
that, and
trailer.
I just watched that movie. I was bored through half of that movie. I felt like I watched this fucking movie.
Would Deadpool not be on your greatest comic book movie list, then?
You know, to be fair,
It's a really good adaptation of the character.
it's a really good origin story. It's a really good origin story.
Right.
I just felt like I was bored.
I think a lot of that
And
could
that's
have
marketing.
that could have been rectified by just not having trailers give everything away.
Yeah, it's only marketing is my only problem with that.
It's like the same issue that I had with Terminator Genesis, because they gave away the biggest plot twist in the movie
So
in the trailer.
terrible.
Well, if you haven't seen the trailers, I won't give it away.
Yeah, don't.
Yeah. But no, I mean,
they did
look,
the same thing in Terminator 2, but...
I honestly think Avengers would have stood on its own as a great movie. It's the best comic book movie, right? Because Watchmen stood on its own. They didn't
Right.
have origin stories, and even after the movie came out, made money, and then they were like, "Hey, we should do origin stories on all the
It's true.
right."
And most of the comics weren't particularly good.
Yeah,
Aside
so-
from, like, Brian Azzarello worked on some of them.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. Like, and the Avengers movie, yes, the lore behind it was greatly enhanced by having background. But did any of those really contribute to right? So Loki was in Thor. Okay,
Right.
he's the main.
They
Right.
contribute in that they didn't have to set up the characters in Avengers because they'd already set up the characters in the other movies.
So you're able to spend a lot more.
I would argue that you don't need to set up the characters every.
I'm not saying you need to set them up every time. I'm just saying, like, as a standalone film, if you went into Avengers without having seen those other movies, you wouldn't have a good representation of who these characters were as far as their personalities.
Well, I mean it's the reason that I think it's the best comic book movie is because it draws from the source material, the comics. But right, if I don't like reading Thor comics, I can read the Avenger comics. I'll get an idea of who Thor is, but I don't care enough about him to go read his comics, so it's not relevant, right?
Right.
And that's true with any series, right? Any comic book series.
Yeah.
You read through the events, someone crosses over, you say, "Oh, that's kind of cool. I'd love to see how that worked."
That's fair.
You go read their comic books.
Yeah, that's typically how giant crossovers work.
Yeah.
Is like, that's how Civil War worked for me. I read Civil War, and then suddenly I was like, oh, I need to go read Black Panther and Wolverine.
Yeah. So and that's why I think it would stand on its own. Like, you don't need to have any preconceived notion. If you want to follow up on Iron Man after you've seen it, cool. How did Iron Man get to this spot in this movie, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you on that because I never watched Iron Man until after I watched Avengers, and I was like, oh, I should probably watch Iron Man.
Yeah.
That's fair. I hadn't actually looked at it at that perspective because, I mean, I watched all of the movies as they
Yeah.
were coming out, and I was like, these are all culminating into this thing that I've been really looking forward to.
Yeah.
Also, Thor. I didn't watch Thor. read that.
Natalie Portman could not save that film.
I read it watching Thor. I did as well. Look, I'm sorry. I did not like Thor.
What about Idris Elba as Heimdall?
He was like the best part.
Yeah, well, he's going to be in Dark Tower.
Him and what's his face?
So that's my vote. Avengers it brought so much to the table. I think it's going to stand on its own long into the future. And really, it did so many things right. It brought together casts from different movies that, to my knowledge, yet to be done. It integrated them all into the storyline well enough. Yeah, you can argue that Tony Stark's still the main character. But that's fine, right? Like, it wasn't X-Men level of, like, this is Wolverine's story or this is Tony Stark's story. And
right.
This is just everybody.
And I think a lot of that had to do with the director, because Whedon's really good at doing characters.
Yeah.
So on that note, that was also why I was kind of hugely disappointed in Avengers 2, because I expected it to follow up and be as good, if not better, than Avengers, and it kind of fell flat. Because I was hoping for like an Empire Strikes Back of Marvel films, and I didn't get that.
You need to stop ranking everything.
Yeah,
Empire Strikes Back.
You just have this like I'm going to compare it to other things.
No, I'm just saying, like, as far as sequels go, I compare all sequels to Empire Strikes Back because it was the best sequel.
You should not do that.
Yeah, you should do that. Sorry, not professional.
But The Empire Strikes Back was really well done.
We're not debating that.
What I'm saying is that...
We're just saying that, like, you have to at least go into it with no expectations.
I'm not trying to say that it needs to be Empire Strikes Back. When I say that I was expecting the Empire Strikes Back of the series, I mean that I was expecting it to improve on everything that I liked on the original.
Okay.
And to be a better film. Not that I was specifically expecting Darth Vader to show up and say that he was Luke's father in the middle of Avengers.
Every time.
I'm disappointed every time.
I don't know, man. Like, I would honestly say, and this is a little off topic, right? But I would now hold sequels accountable to Captain America, the Captain America Winter Soldier standards.
That did improve.
It improved.
It did, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that they changed directors for it.
And maybe that is, but I would say that you're coming from, okay, if we're using the Star Wars thing, coming from a good movie to a better movie. And in my opinion, with Captain America, you're coming from a subpar movie to a fantastic movie.
That depends on how you see A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, because I rank A New Hope pretty low down there. It's like a good movie, and then Empire Strikes Back is a phenomenal movie. But it's the same idea of, like, a sequel should always improve on the original source material.
Yeah, I agree.
The problem that a lot of sequels run into is that they don't ever improve. They just do the same thing, and nobody enjoys them as much because you already saw it in the first film, which is what Avengers did, unfortunately.
I like Ultron. Sorry,
Ultron was good, but the first one was better.
Oh yeah,
by far.
Well, I mean, they captured lightning in a bottle, right?
Yeah.
And as boring as you think Dark Knight is, like, the reason people didn't like Dark Knight Rises was because they're like, this isn't as good as Dark Knight.
Well, it also had a whole lot more plot holes than Dark Knight did. There were so many plot holes in Dark Knight Rises.
Jesus.
The biggest plot hole being, like, how did Bruce Wayne get to the other side of the planet and back? And how long did it take him to heal his back? And why was everything still going on by the time he was done with his healing?
Did y'all not, in Batman vs. Superman, I think I covered this, but when he was, like, doing the whole, like, push-ups or pull-ups with the thing with the, like, weights on it, I was like, oh, look, he's doing the Dark Knight Rises thing, where he fixed his back.
It's true.
That's what he did.
Fair enough.
Also, why did all of the police force go down into the sewer? That made no sense.
Also, okay, this is a different conversation.
Yes.
I'm about to get into
it. So you've heard Brian's Watchmen, you've heard mine Avengers. Sam, you've been relatively quiet on the best comic.
Well, I feel like we still haven't properly defined what makes a good movie because, like, I mean,
I don't even know if there's a definition, right? Avengers is what I think is the best comic. I wouldn't necessarily say it's my favorite. If you had a favorite thing, it would definitely be up there, but I don't know if it's my favorite.
I think ultimately it might be just like you can't really define what makes a good comic book movie because it's the same as defining what makes a good movie.
Because you could say, right, like, oh, well, the best comic movies are funny. Well, that's not true. Watchmen has, like, its overall tone is serious.
But within those parameters that you're giving it does, right? And those are the parameters that I need to distinguish because you have very good points about Avengers. I honestly do agree with you about that because it made me go back and watch the other movies. But I also really like how they did Captain America. Now I haven't actually read his comic books at all, but like from what I've known about him, like it portrayed him and the bad guy pretty well, I would say, and it got me more interested into the Marvel universe, right?
Right.
But I also like Avengers because it's really good. So it's just like
it has to do a little bit. Watchmen, for the most part of the comic, is almost all serious.
And also-
it injects a little humor.
It also
Yeah.
works out because Snyder did the film, and Snyder's known for doing really good action films, or at least action sequences. And I think that helped with Watchmen because you didn't really it added to the overall film and tone of the story because you didn't really have as good of action in the comic because it was an old comic.
It's really cool.
he was able to stylize it.
Yeah, he did a great job of stylizing it and adapting it to the big screen.
I need to watch that again. I've only seen it once, and
So
I never read
good.
the comics.
And the director's cut is even better.
Well, see, and that's my thing, right? So it has to do a little everything because when you look at a film like Spider-Man, right, it pulls a lot of things from the comics. And it does a decent job, but it's really selective in what it does, right? Like it sometimes Peter Parker is the smart-ass, like funny, like quick-witted guy,
Right.
and then sometimes, and that's when I feel like it's at its worst. Think of freaking Mary Jane, right? In the comics, she's not the most important person outside of Peter Parker's life, but plays a pretty big role, and she's written pretty well over most of the series. I mean, yeah, she doesn't have those one-offs. She's awful, terrible, hate her, right? and that plays into the movie as a whole. So I don't think you can define it one way, right? So Watchmen is really serious. It's a really good movie. Schneider's Batman series, Batman trilogy, or Nolan's, sorry. Nolan's Batman trilogy, super serious most of the time.
Yeah, it was like super.
And
Batman.
it turned people off, right? So you can't say, oh, well, the only good comic movies have to be serious. Right?
No. I think
But
that.
they can't all be funny, right? Like,
Right.
Guardians of the Galaxy is really funny. No one said Guardians of the Galaxy was the best comic.
A lot of people said that it was really, really good.
Well, no, I'm not debating
I'm just
whether or
saying.
not it's good.
I mean, most of the people didn't say it was a good comic book movie because most people haven't read Guardians of the Galaxy.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying it's not in the discussion for best.
Right.
But it's also the flip side. It's not super serious. It's really funny.
Right.
Most of it.
I think, honestly, one of the big things is that you have to be true to the source material. Whether or not you adapt it perfectly to the screen, it has to be true to the material. Because if
But
you...
it has to, but it doesn't have to be exactly to film because film is a totally different medium.
Right. Because, I mean, like, if you had done a Deadpool movie that was super serious, that just happened to have the character of Deadpool in it, it wouldn't have worked. Like, at all.
So do we have to take the superhero or comic book aspect out of it and say it has to be a good movie first and then, you know what I'm saying?
Well,
like,
I think it kind of has to stand on both legs. It has to be a good comic book film, but it also has to be a good film.
like you have to have interesting characters.
Right. You can't just say it's a good superhero movie and not have anything going on in the film other than just people punching each other.
So if we're going by those standards, those parameters, and we're taking your word on this, god damn it. But I guess Avengers would have to be on that list because I haven't read like how it all started. But
Right.
if that's how it happened, then okay, yes, I will.
It's true to the source material. I mean, to an extent. Most of the story is based off of the Ultimates timeline and not off of the original Avengers, which makes sense because the entire Ultimates universe was about bringing the old characters into modern day.
Yeah.
And so it works on that end. It's got solid casting. Joss Whedon is a really good director, and he makes solid films. So it pretty much meets all the criteria.
Because with Watchmen, like you're explaining really, really well, like it adapts it to film really well, right?
Right.
But they changed the ending entirely.
Yeah, some people were really upset about it. Some people liked it. I personally thought it was a great decision.
It made sense. Like
It's
I
less
haven't
fantastical. Right? You don't have to stretch your imagination.
Right.
As
It made
far.
more. It was more
grounded. Yeah.
And that's what I liked about it.
That whole movie was nothing but grounded.
Yeah, that's why when I read
when
I read the original comic, I was like, "What alien? The fuck is this?" And so it didn't really fit into everything else that was going on. But when you watch the movie, and then it's like, oh, he's using Dr. Manhattan as a catalyst for this explosion, and he's going to make him a bad guy. And Manhattan's okay with it because he understands the importance of it. And it works better with the characters and the story. The characters understood the reason behind it. Whereas, I mean, they kind of explain it in the comics, but at the end of the day, you're like, why'd you just put a giant fucking squid in the middle of Manhattan? That doesn't make sense.
Giant squid?
Yeah.
It's like a squid.
Have you not read the comic?
No.
Oh. Yeah, in the comic, it's like a giant squid monster thing in the middle of Manhattan. Doesn't work as well. just explaining it like that, does it make any more sense?
No.
Add to the fact that it was a global seal.
And I mean,
in
it was.
well, no, in the movie, right? So
Yeah.
in the book, it was like, oh, there's an alien in Manhattan,
Yeah.
and the world unites around it. But
Yeah,
in
they
the
were
movie,
doing
it
the
was
same
like,
idea of like in the comics it was the same premise of
well, I'm
they
saying,
used
like,
the
it was
alien and we're like, oh, we should be worried about the aliens,
Yeah,
not
but
about
in
each
the-
other.
In the movie, didn't he detonate the devices across the world?
No, it was just the one in Manhattan because Manhattan he like transports Manhattan
Yeah.
over there and causes him to explode.
I know.
And then everyone's like, oh my god, Dr. Manhattan's a bad guy.
But to that point, right? I mean, greatest comic book movie. That's not to say that none of the other ones are good, and that's a different discussion.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all subjective. What I think is the greatest comic book movie isn't going to be the same as what Sam thinks or what John thinks.
And these aren't necessarily our favorites.
Though Watchmen is pretty much at the top of my list for favorite comic book film.
I feel like I need to watch it again. I really do.
And that's why I was excited about Snyder doing Batman vs. Superman and Justice League, because I think that he'll do a really good job with Justice League because he did a really good job with Watchmen, and it's basically the same idea.
It is basically the same idea, but you just said like it deviated from the.
And you can't just assume that director.
I don't think it's going to be as good because it's a very different Snyder that's coming to this movie versus when he was still relatively new back when he made Watchmen.
Not to mention that, like, I'm sure the producers and Warner Brothers and everybody is like also weighing in on this, whereas I'm sure Watchmen not so much.
Right, Watchmen wasn't. I mean, it was a big deal, but it wasn't to the same level of Batman and Superman.
They didn't try to get a Watchmen like film adaptation for like ever, and
Right.
no one wanted because it was very daunting. Like it's such a like people fall.
Right,
That's
one of the reasons that I also thought it was great was the fact that it's got such a following to it. People expected it to be something.
Didn't it win like some award that people were like, "Oh, would never right?" But nothing.
Maybe, probably.
Sure.
It won awards.
It won, and people at the time, right? Like, comic books are for kids, right? These aren't, you know what I mean? Like it's that whole, it's like that whole video game like thing, like, oh, these are for kids. Well, really?
Yeah, that's an old way of thinking.
And not just that, the movie was a really good commentary on the Cold War.
What's your obsession with the Cold War, man?
We're still in the Cold War, John.
It happened.
It's still a thing. As soon as nukes became a thing, the Cold War existed, and the Cold War will continue to exist forever until somebody blows the fuck out of somebody else.
Or until all the players.
But, I mean, I'm not trying to get into that conversation here.
Or until all the players decide together to get rid of all of them.
Justice League TV show.
Oh, I was talking about
Then we'll get
Metal Gear.
Then we'll,
yeah. Well, a Metal Gear scenario is probably more likely than Justice League.
No. Aliens are going to invade right after.
It's not going to happen. How hilarious would it be if the entirety of the human race decided to get rid of nuclear warheads and then we got invaded by aliens?
That would be like the Simpsons episode.
Well, so that was our opinions of it, right? So
is that what it boiled down to then? Just the two, Watchmen and Avengers? You didn't have anything else to bring to the table?
I mean, everything that I kept thinking of, and I was even looking up older movies, trying to come up with something.
just don't compare.
Yeah, like if we're setting the parameters that it pulls from the source material and it excels as a movie as its own, then those are the only ones that I can really think of.
And I think they both succeed in very different ways, too.
Yeah.
Because they're very, very different movies, outside of being superhero team-ups.
Batman Superman should have looked to Watchmen.
Yeah.
It should have.
Because, again, right, we talked about, they set up Night Owl, Rorschach, Dr. Manhattan. Like, they set up all the characters without having the origin story of every single one of them.
Right.
And they didn't, I got enough of each character to be like, oh, I like this one, I hate this one. So they didn't need to flashback.
Well, I mean, they did a lot of flashbacks in Watchmen.
Well, sorry, dream sequences. That's what I meant to say.
They could have very easily done the same thing with Batman and Superman if they had continued with the whole Superman God motif.
Yeah.
But they didn't. So I don't think that that's a bad thing. But that's really the only way I saw that film going that would have put it on par with Watchmen. Which is, like, how cool would it be if he ended up doing an Injustice movie at some point? It's not going to happen, but it would be really cool. Because how awesome would it be to see that Superman on the big screen?
There would be
riots in the street.
People are already, look, we discussed in the last one, people are already upset about the whole Superman killing Zod thing. So having him just offing superheroes and supervillains, like, it's just more superheroes, supervillains, just get pissed.
I hope they do it.
I mean, I would love to see it. Or just go buy Injustice: Gods Among Us, play through that,
or just read the comics.
Yeah, or that.
You don't have to play the game if you don't play games.
You should, though.
Or if you don't suffer Mortal Kombat claims like I do.
You should, though. All right, well, that's all we're doing for today. Avengers and Watchmen. Sorry if you don't agree, but
I think based off of the parameters that we set, they make sense.
yeah, I don't think any.
I hope I'm not being biased. I feel like
I mean, you
like I said,
probably
I was trying to think of older movies.
Well,
like
no,
the
I mean,
original
like, I
Batman.
entirely agree as to why Avengers would be there, be up there as well. I'm just hoping that I'm not coming across as being biased because I think Watchmen is best comic film. But I think based on the information that I have, it makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. All right, guys. Well, we're gonna close this one out, and
Next week, cats, boots. Why do they exist?
all right, we'll catch you guys later. Bye.
Later.